Greetings. I'd like to make, again, ideally a short video to walk you through a few of the details surrounding essay number one. This handout is available in the current module. Take a look and read through it probably before you watch this, and then I'll just try to fill in some of the details. The basic idea behind essay number one is that it's a short piece of writing that asks you to read two articles, summarize them, and then synthesize them. The articles that you're reading are you will find, I would not say that they're simple or necessarily easy, if we want to use those terms. They are, on the other hand, much more straightforward than Walker Percy's Lost of the Creature. And that was our rationale for starting with that very difficult essay that we're still kind of working through and talking about. When you develop the skills to summarize something like that, working with these articles should feel a little bit more straightforward. Although I will note that they are still challenging. It's not easy, and I think that sometimes we think about summary as something that is basic, like, oh, that's something you learn in junior high. But good summary is actually challenging to do well. That's the purpose of this assignment. So you're going to choose two articles from the George Wright Centennial Essay Series, and there's a link for that in the module. You should choose the articles that interest you the most. So you can scan through and look at the titles. You can click on them, the individual PDFs, and maybe just read opening paragraphs of some of them before you make your choice. All of these articles are about the National Park System, and in the other video and the reading assignment, there's an introduction to this essay series. They're all about the National Park Service. They all come at it from very different ways. So really feel free to try to find articles that at least mirror your interests in some ways. As you might guess, a lot of them are about ecology and the environment. But that's not the only thing that's addressed here. Many of them are about funding, financial, the way that the park system is run from a financial perspective. Many of them are about politics. They are about issues having to do with race and ethnicity at the national parks, about history, about design, about climate change. There really are a lot of different lenses through which these authors view the National Park Service. So I'd really encourage you to find texts that are interesting to you. When you do this then, you're going to read your text and then you're going to write for each one double-space page of summary. And we're going to call this a rhetorical summary, which means that the summary should include not just what the article says, but also describe its major rhetorical elements, which in this case would be what is its purpose, who is the audience, what is the style, what is the context. Watch the other video in conjunction with the essay introduction in order to get more information about what those rhetorical elements are. We're going to talk about some of the elements of summary that maybe aren't so straightforward. Your summary has to be accurate, but at the same time, you're going to have to make a lot of choices. No two summaries, even of the same text, would look the same. You're going to have to think about what details to include, what to emphasize, how to describe the rhetorical elements. Think about if you had a page to describe and explain this article to someone who hadn't read it. What would be the clearest way to do that? You can, and one of the rules that we talked about on Discord last week really seems to apply here. It doesn't always apply, right? But many people said we wouldn't necessarily use I or first person. I'm never going to say that you should not ever do that. In this case, though, really your summaries, the subject of your sentences shouldn't be I or you. It should be the author, the article, specific examples that they talk about. Really, that's what you want to be focused on. The one other thing I'll say here is that there are 3 articles that appear on our syllabus. One is the introduction, obviously. The other is Holly Fretwell's The Franchise Model, A Better Solution for Our National Parks, or something like that. It's by Holly Fretwell. And the other one is by Marty Blatt. And again, the name escapes me, but it's on our syllabus. Just look at the schedule of course readings. Please do not choose either of those. We're going to work on those as a class to kind of give examples of how this would work. So you will have one page that will be a summary of your first article. You'll have one page that will be a summary of your second article. Those are guidelines. If you go a little bit over a page, or a little bit under a page, that's okay. If you write half a page and you think you've summarized your article fully, I'm going to guess that you've left some things out. If you can't, if you're going a page and a half or 2 pages on your summary, I'm going to suggest that you aren't thinking enough about how to distill this, about how to be selective and make choices. So again, you don't need to email me if you're, it's a page and a quarter or something like that. That's okay. But in general, a page for each summary. Then, on or around page 3, you'll have a paragraph in which you synthesize these 2 essays. So I'm going to talk about that briefly now, and we will return to it in the coming week if it doesn't quite make sense to you after that explanation. Essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to put these articles into conversation with each other. And they're not in conversation. These authors aren't speaking to each other. They don't know what the other person is saying. Your role as a writer is going to say, well, let's imagine these 2 authors in a room. What would they say? How do their ideas sync up? How do they conflict? Maybe they're both talking about the same or similar problems. They're proposing different solutions, perhaps. Would those solutions work together? Would they be in conflict with each other? Could one complement the other? Are there concepts that one author talks about that could apply to the others? Those are the kinds of things we're talking about when we talk about synthesis. We are not talking about compare and contrast. And when I say compare and contrast, many of you have, if you remember, have probably done assignments like this in the past, where essentially you list, here's what's similar, here's what's different. This goes a little bit beyond that. Those are things you could notice, but your actual synthesis, again, should try to place these texts into conversation with each other. So now, well, this person is interested in climate change and this person is interested in politics, but instead, well, this person is suggesting an approach to politics that could actually be applied in a really interesting way to the problem that this other author sees about climate change. We'll do a lot more work with this. We'll look at some examples next week, but that's a general overview of what synthesis looks like and how it's different than compare and contrast. This essay, again, summary, synthesis. We do not need things like an introduction that previews the paper. We don't need a thesis statement. That wouldn't really make sense. We don't need a summary, a conclusion at the end. We don't need transitions. Summary, synthesis. Okay, so you can skip some of those other parts of essays that will be important later this semester, but for this, just has to have those 3 components. And again, your audience, think about writing this for a Colorado State University student who has not read these articles. Okay, so you're writing to somebody who is not familiar with them. So just the logistics here. We will do, you'll have a first draft due on Monday, February 8th. So in other words, we have about, even if you don't start this until Monday, February 1st, you have a week just to write a draft of a 2.5 to 3 page paper. And then it'll be due Friday on Canvas. We'll do in between that time a workshop on Discord, and I'll give you more information about that. 2.5 to 3 pages, double spaced. MLA format for inline citations and works cited. And I do want you to have works cited. It's just going to have 2 articles in it, right? The 2 articles that you're summarizing. So it should be fairly straightforward. Essentially, this is practice for the essays that we're going to do later that have more sources. So I would look up MLA works cited format. The place I would recommend you doing that is the Purdue Online Writing Lab. I'll provide some resources about that as well, and you can feel free to ask me. But these are pretty straightforward in terms of their citation. So that's information that you really should be able to find, and I'd recommend kind of figuring out where to look for that now when we just have two sources, as opposed to later projects where you'll have many sources. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Make sure you also watch the video that discusses the introductory essay and rhetorical elements, because it's really kind of key detail on this assignment.